I'm Shahar Azani, and welcome to this episode of Eye on Israel. When words like Zionism and pioneers come to mind, one envisions the history of modern Israel and the coming into being of the Jewish state. In today's episode, we are about to learn that such concepts are not just part of Israel's past, but are very much embedded and connected to Israel's present and future. In 1999, 4 childhood friends set out on a hike across Israel with a mission to determine what Zionism meant for the next generation. They trekked through the Negev and the Galilee regions of Israel and saw a vast space of land largely neglected. Communities were sparse and growing old, while the youth were leaving for the country's center. In these forgotten lands, those friends foresaw the future. This was when pioneering in Israel had entered a new era, and Or movement was born. Or being the Hebrew word for light. Today, over 45,000 Or movement pioneers live in new and renewed communities of the Negev and Galilee regions of Israel. Today, I am absolutely thrilled to be joined by 2 of those friends, co-founders of Or movement. Roni is Or's CEO and co-founder. He was born in Israel in 1976 and grew up in the city of Petah Tikva in central Israel. He served as a combat soldier and team commander in the IDF's elite Egoz unit. Ofir is Or's co-founder. He was born in South Africa in 1976, arrived with his family in Israel when he was only 3 years old, and grew up as well in Petah Tikva. Ofir served for 6 years as the submarines captain in the IDF's Navy. Such a pleasure to have both of you here with us today.
Pleasure being here.
So Or is one of Israel's best kept secrets. I have recently visited Israel and got to see some of your work, and I came back knowing that this is a story I absolutely have to share with our viewers and the greater community here in the United States. So maybe let's start at the beginning. 4 friends went on a hike. Tell me a little bit about how did it all begin?
Actually, before this hike, there was a previous hike or previous trip. On the age of 17, we went to see, the Holocaust camps in Poland. Actually, we didn't take this trip from the good causes at the beginning, but something happened to us there. Living in Israel today, it's not like in the days of the establishment, and you stand there in Treblinka, and suddenly you ask yourself, what is to be a Jew? What is Israel?
So this was just the high school trip.
Yeah, the high school trip, and the 4 of us are going. And after 4 days, starting to ask these questions and then coming back to Israel, and you can skip it and say, okay, it belongs to our family, it's very sad, it belongs to the past, but what it means for us and what is our take. And somehow we were talking to each other and declared, one day after the army, we will establish an organization, we'll call it O means light, as you said, and we will make sure that Israel is the best country on the planet to live in. And declarations, it doesn't cost any money, you can say whatever.
Well, I just have to understand something. You're talking about high school. You're in high school. Yeah. It's even before your army service.
Yes.
Yeah, like 17 years old.
17. So can I ask you, was there anything specific that you saw during the trip that triggered that emotion, those thoughts? Because it's not, usual for 17-year-olds to have such visions for the future.
Everything that I don't remember that there is anything specifically, like anything in particular. It's just the entire experience that brought us to start thinking what can be our role in making Israel a better country, a safer country, that something like this will not happen again. That was what triggered us.
Wow, you're mentioning never again. Never again is something that so many of our viewers know here in the United States, the notion of never again, but usually never again sums itself up with this annual declaration of never again, this occasional social media post. And here you are telling us that never again means a concrete commitment to create a reality on the ground which is different than what we've seen in the past.
Yeah, we didn't know really what we're going to do. We just knew that we are going to dedicate our life for something big and for something that will change the path or be integral part of the path of Israel's future. It took us some time throughout the entire army service to figure out what is the mission of our generation, but eventually we did decide, and this is what we're going to talk about today.
We're trying to actually think about the lessons, okay? What we can take from the past to nowadays. And again, as Ofir said, what is our role of our generation? And we understood that we must have a vision. We must have a big picture, and then to follow by big actions and implementation. What can unite us? What is the meaning of life and being a Jew these days all over the planet, and especially in Israel? So with these big questions, as Ofir said, without any answers, we started to think and analyze it, and then you go to the army. And all of us, we lost friends during our army service.
So let me dig deeper into the army service, because you have this vision during high school on that trip. Then you go into the army. What happened in the course of your army service that contributed to the vision? Have you undergone any kind of, change as a result of that significant service, whether in the Navy or as part of EGOZ?
So I started, today there's a TV show Fauda. So I served in this kind of unit at the beginning, and then they canceled us during the peace process, and then we opened and established the EGOZ unit to fight the Hezbollah up north. So suddenly we were in the south, in the north. Something in the back of our mind started to understand that there is something that is not only in Tel Aviv, in Israel, but especially my first operation in the army, when I lost 2 friends. And then you ask yourself, these guys, they were risking their lives, like all of us, but they did this heroic thing. What made them take this step? Why they sacrificed it? Because they had to be already out of the army, going with their girlfriends to Thailand or South America.
Right.
And then they are taking such a decision. What now we supposed to do? So again, you can start to smoke cigarettes and to be depressed, and you can take a step and to step in and say, let's do something. Let's sacrifice not our lives, but dedicate our life to something big. And for me, that was the plug in. And the moment that you decide that it's not just about declarations and words, but you're going to do it.
Yeah, so at that point, you mentioned the hike, so it was literally a hike when we decided.
After the army.
It was, for some of us, it was during the army. For some of us, it was after the army. Because I was 6 years in the Navy, and Roni and the other friends, they were already out. So I was doing all of this in my spare time when I had. But we did start to really travel along the country whenever we had free time, meeting hundreds of people, just asking them the question, what is the most important thing that you believe that should be done in Israel? And it took us time, because you meet a lot of people and each one has a different answer. And you hear that now it's the most important thing is economy, and the most important thing is education, and the most important thing is help poor people, etc., etc. And you have so many choices, security, etc. And then we figured that maybe Ityeshvut, which is the literal translation will be settling. Sometimes settlement has a negative connotation for some people, but we're talking about Ityeshvut, like to settle the land of Israel. It doesn't matter if it's in the Negev or somewhere else.
Correct.
But we realized that that action of establishing a new community, it actually consists all of these things that everybody else think that because if you build a community, it contributes to security. You need to do like mutual responsibility. You deal with education. You deal with helping with affordable housing. So everything is under that roof, and that's why we decided to start as our first step and actually establish a new community. That this is what we are still living in Petach Tikva at that point.
All right.
Still living in Petach Tikva, meeting every Friday night in a lot of times in my parents' house, sometimes in other places, and just talking about what exactly we want to do and how.
I mean, excuse me, I just have to stop you there, because if I'm a youngster watching TV at the moment, people think to themselves, what do I want to do in the future? Building a community.
Yeah,
you can imagine
our parents left on us as well.
The legalities, the bureaucracies. Just imagine what that entails. And your youngsters fresh out of, what do you do to build a community? What's the first thing you do? You sit there at your parents' house, you discuss it, you envision, you dream. What's the first step you take in the direction of creating that community? I have to know.
Before you establish a community, in the age of 22, as you said, who is talking about it? Like our parents and family and friends talking to us and saying, guys, you lost your mind. What about your degree, your trip after the army? We have businesses in the family, you need to be part of it. We are losing you. And then in a way, you join them, you call them to be part of this journey. And the journey of our future, of our vision, of what can unite us. And as Ofir said, you want to start with something that is an action, not just words. And we understood that the Negev and the Galilee, 75% of the land of Israel, it's very important to populate them and to develop them. But in the end of the day, they are the real platform for the next phase of Israel. So before we are establishing our first community, we're trying, to be in touch with the existing communities, kibbutzim, moshavim, development towns. Actually, they kicked us off. None of them accepted us. We were sure, red carpet, just come, be part of Zionism.
You wanted to go and talk to existing
towns, villages, to be part of them.
You wanted to live there.
And they actually told us, the kibbutzim, no, you don't part of us, the moshavim, you're not a son or grandson, you're not from the family. Development towns, we came to Yerucham, Shlomi, Kiryat Shmona, they told us, guys, we all about to leave. You're entering in. We found nobody to talk with about our dreams. And to be honest, we're just a second from forgetting from this dream. And in life, everything is like the solutions are coming a minute before everything collapses. It means that you never give up. And we were lucky to meet with Ariel Sharon. He was that days the Minister of Infrastructure. But always he was taking with him this package of the Israel and the land.
You're about to despair, and then you happen to meet with then Minister of Infrastructure, Ariel Sharon. How did you get to meet the minister? Like you just happened to meet the minister? How did that work? What happened?
Actually, a very close friend of my father, late Moti Zisser, which was a very good friend, and also in the years later also a supporter of our movement. He hosted a parlor meeting in his home for the leading business people of Israel. It was 1998, the end of 1998. And the topic of this parlor meeting was establishing islands in front of Tel Aviv. So there is already then, in 98, they were talking about the housing crisis and that there is not enough room in the center, which will lead us soon to the conversation about what we're doing today. But they were already planning on building the islands. Instead of going to the Negev and to the Galil, they are talking about establishing islands. And Moti decided to arrange this meeting, and before this event, we met for like 5-10 minutes. And after 5 minutes, he already said, guys, I'm yours, anything that you want. I was waiting for you for 15 years because like a decade and a half that no significant action was taken in the south and the north since the beginning of the 80s.
You're saying that's Sharon.
Sharon saying to us, I was waiting for you for 15 years. Because since the Mitzpim that he established in the beginning of the 80s, the Negev and the Galilee got into a stagnation of new blood and new projects and new communities, and this is where we came to the picture. And with the help of Arik Sharon, we actually did the first move. Yeah,
the great bulldozer of Israeli settlements on both meanings, and that was just by happenstance. You were about
we were about
give up
to give up,
and there you go. You're literally bumping into Ariel Sharon. And he's on board. Then what happens?
Yep. Then he said, okay, so what is the problem? I want you want to take such a step. What is the problem? So we started to say, the kibbutzim, the moshavim. I said, no crying. What do you want? He said, maybe we should establish a new community, a new town. I said, so what is the problem? They told us that he really likes maps. So we brought a map of Israel, we put it on the table, we showed him the different options. And he said, this is the best options. Why? Because it's between the Palestinians, the Bedouins, like people that came from here, from there. It's in the middle of the Negev. He said, so what is the problem? He said, this is a military base. He said, no, no, no. It's a base that meant to be for citizens. So I'm waiting for somebody to civilize it. And 3 months later, that's what we did. And actually, it's a one-way ticket. Like, you go there, the four of us, and then you stand on a mountain. They said, okay, I'm a pioneer. What should I do? What do you do now? And then you start to understand the complexity. You need water, you need sewage, you need electricity,
Right.
and you need people. And these people, they are coming with kids. We are in the age of 22, we understand nothing.
What is a
And
daycare
then-
center?
Daycare center. They need jobs as well. And who's supposed to supply all these things? And then we understood what is the OR movement all about. It's about your ability to take a great vision and then to create the innovation. But the most important thing is to start with the action and never give up. And to create from the problems and the challenges, the solutions. And then you start to deal and act for the solutions of housing and jobs and create the daycare centers and playgrounds. And everything we did, we started to create the model.
And that was in the first settlement
That was the
you were
first. We
creating.
did any possible mistake, by the way. I did, for sure. Ofir had less mistakes than me, but I did every possible mistakes, but we were teaching ourselves because we had no teachers. And again, suddenly this Sharon, the Minister of Infrastructure, is becoming a Prime Minister. And people that were very skeptical during our journey starting to stare and say, it's not a joke, they are serious. And then you ask yourself, what is the next step? Because to establish one community town after 15 years that nobody did it, it's one thing.
When did you establish the first new community under OR?
So April 21st, 1999, which was the day of independence, Yom
wow.
Ha'atzmaut. That was the day that we broke ground, and actually the change, the achlafa, like the transition between the army service and the civilized world, the civilian moved in. So we just moved the four of us with a couple of other couples that joined us. 3 months later, we were able to bring another 14 families.
So you're moving there yourselves?
Yeah, take our things from Petah Tikva.
You
we're
walk
moving
the
there.
talk, otherwise...
You walk the talk. So you move in, what's the name of that settlement that you created?
Sansana.
Sansana. Yeah. And that was the first community that the OR movement created with you breaking ground.
That's true.
What kind of services did you have when you came in? Like nothing. There was
that
nothing.
was what
Nothing.
Roni spoke before about everything that you suddenly realize that you need generator and electricity and water and everything else. And there were some funny stories about
Pioneering
lack of infrastructure.
Zionism. Pioneering Zionism. It's just incredible just to sit and listen to you.
I remember Ron Lauder coming for a Shabbat to spend with us. He started to be in touch with us and to support, like, thank God, many other partners in the future. And in a way, Ron Lauder is coming from here, from Manhattan, and suddenly living in a caravan for Shabbat and understanding that there is no electricity and the water, in the middle of Shabbat, we were out of water because we had no pipes, we had nothing. Like, literally, you do everything in your hands. And such an enormous stories and episodes about these times, but it's such a huge energy because you face every day or few times a day so many challenges, and people are staring and people are watching and people are laughing, and you ask yourself, can we do it? And every day you said yes and yes and yes, and suddenly things are happening and things are moving forward and the success is there. So that was the beginning, and then we thought about, is it enough? Which is something that every day we ask ourselves, what should we do? You see the COVID, you see Ukraine.
Well, when you ask yourself, is it enough? You're already creating the settlement. You live there, you start building it, right? Mm-hmm. You learn the hard way, as you said, Roni, making
create
mistakes.
Models.
Right. When do you decree that community already exists? Like you're done?
I don't think that there is any time that it's done, but at that point, it became a success story. And it started to create a buzz because every person that considered himself a Zionist or a pioneer at that time from our circles usually went to live in Judea and Samaria. And suddenly we're coming with a different message that we need to expand strength and develop the Negev and the Galilee, which are 75% of the country. And suddenly this creates a buzz, and Sansana becomes famous all over the country in the modern Orthodox Bnei Akiva crowd. And we're starting to get phone calls from people who said to us, oh wow, we established one community, why don't you help us establish also another new community? And mayors of regional councils started to call us and say that you established a community in this regional council, why don't we establish also one in our council? And this is how it, like, the buzz started. We realized at that point, first of all, that we need to know everything that is happening in the Negev and the Galilee, and that was the beginning of the information center of the Negev and the Galilee, which exists and operating until today, with tens of thousands of families and people that are going through it every day. But at that point, didn't exist yet. We were just 4 friends that wanted to do good things, so we started helping other groups to establish other new towns, and somehow we established 2 others in the following 2 years. And at that point, we realized that this is the time now to scale up,
right,
and to create a platform that can help anybody that has a dream, a vision, or a wish, or something that they want to do in the Negev and the Galilee. And
you just happened to create 2 more communities. I'm just listening to you. You just happened to create 2 more communities.
It's not just happened, it's a lot of work. But,
right, but you already did, and by the time you reach your 3rd, you decide, let's create the skeleton, the infrastructure to continue scale this up. And at that point, the Israeli government, like you mentioned, was talking about islands outside of Tel Aviv, the thoughts of, how do we help ease the crisis in Israel of housing? We need to create better transportation from the Negev and the Galilee into central Israel. Very early on, you changed that perception in the way you constructed Or, right? Your vision was different than that kind of vision.
Yeah, you need to move the cheese, as we say, right? So Israel is about specific concept about how we develop, or kind of, everybody is starting to make money. It's the hype of the high tech and
right.
the immigration from Russia in the 90s, and the Intifada, the first one is going down, the second one is going up, and we are in between all these things, and we walk like this in between the drops, and suddenly we understand that we are touching the right direction. And as we said, the Prime Minister knows us and the ministers, and in order to build a new town in the Negev and the Galilee, you need government decision, and you need budget, and you need to go over all the bureaucracy, right, and the committees of planning, and you have so many approvals, and then to bring the people and the jobs and the infrastructure. So you are touching so many things. Then we said, okay, it's possible. It's possible. Yes, it's 20, sometimes 22 hours a day of working in the last 19 years, but here it comes. And from building new communities and towns, we started to understand that there are the existing moshavim and kibbutzim, and the development towns, and the Bedouins and the Arabs, and the ultra-Orthodox, and so many challenges in societies. So we collected the data, and then we started to bring a new vision. We have realized that since Ben Gurion and Herzl, nobody said, I have a dream, where Israel is going to look like in our 100th anniversary, for example. And again, the demography and the cost of living and the cost of housing, and everywhere you look, you see prosperity on one hand and poverty on the other hand.
Right, great
and
disparities.
We said, yeah, what should we do? So Israel is an unbelievable junction, and we need to decide, and we need to act, and to see if we can make sure that we are going to the right direction.
So the vision here, if I understand you both correctly, is instead of thinking about extending the center of Israel outwards, you were saying, no, the Negev and the Galilee are centers on their own. And we need to develop and create them as the future hubs of Israel, not under, but parallel to what's happening in central Israel.
Yeah, but like the way that we got to this vision was following what Roni said, that and you said also in the beginning that we started to ask ourselves, is it enough? And now it's not after one community, but it's after 8 new towns and tens of thousands of people that relocated to our communities. But still, we can sit all day long and tap on our shoulder and say, we did great and nobody else did it before, and be very satisfied with what we do. But we keep asking ourselves if this is what is needed for Israel. And then we started to dig in to the numbers and the demography, and we realized that Israel is doubling the population. At that time when we started talking about it, Israel was 8.5 million people, and Israel is doubling. It's the highest, it's the Western country with the highest growth rate in the world. Right. 3.2 kids per family. We are going to reach and become 17, maybe 18, even 18 million people by its 100th centennial birthday. And we started to ask ourselves, okay, so what's going to happen? What's the picture of Israel in 100 years? And we realized that if the same ratio between the center and the Negev and the Galilee will stay like it used to be 20 years ago and today, which is 75-25% more or less between the center and the south and the north, then we're creating two problems, separate problems, but together it's a huge problem for Israel. Right. One is that the center is becoming already oversaturated, and remember that already in 1998 they were talking about islands. Right. We're now 2016. The center is exploding, cost of living, lack of housing opportunity, lack of housing options, the infrastructure, the traffic jams, etc. And it's just going to become much bigger problem in 30 years if this stays the same, like the growth rate. And the south and the north, the majority of the population will become from the low socioeconomic layers. And then what you create is a country that you have a very, very expensive center, oversaturated with lack of opportunities for the young generation, and a very poor and undeveloped and disinvested areas in the south and the north. And the outcome of this understanding, and I'm summarizing here thousands of hours of work with professionals and teams and committees that joined, is that the solution for it is that Israel needs to become a three centers country, and not just one center and a periphery, but one big center in the south with 3-4 million people, one big metropolis and center in the north with 4 or 5 million people, and then the pressure on the center is also decreasing, and you're not going to become 13 million people in Tel Aviv area, but 9 million people, 9.5 million people. And that's the main vision and the main strategy that our movement is leading today.
And this is a new concept, because it's not trains to connect you and create a bigger problem.
We've been used to hearing from the
everybody thinks that the solution is the train.
Right.
Yeah, because only in Tel Aviv there is the best education, culture, health, jobs. We said, no, it's the opposite. It's like nearshores within Israel. It's growing markets within Israel. It's 75% of the land that we didn't plan yet, and for sure didn't plant yet. So this is our generation and next generation's role. And independent center that can provide everything, can generate and create mobility and resiliency to each individual in this region, and create a shared vision and a shared future, and then the mutual responsibility within the Negev and the Galilee, and the story, the narrative. What is our story today?
Right.
It's not about one day we will leave Morocco or Europe or Iran and we'll move somewhere. Where are we going to go? Like the young generation is looking for a story, to be part of something. And this is the new magnet of Israel that will help both Tel Aviv and what we call today periphery, and tomorrow it's the new centers of Israel.
Right. I have to ask you, you started with parlor meetings, literally living room meetings with your families, convincing them, getting your parents on board. But at the end of the day, you transitioned an entire thought process of a government from islands off the shores of Tel Aviv to a ministry dedicated for the development of Negev and Galilee. So you've had a journey there as well, to change mindset and directions of the policymakers in Israel.
And we're still in the beginning of it. Because even today, for example, which is Like the partnership that is being created with the government is incredible and one of the most amazing in the last 20 years of operation. Still the mindset of the public is not there. And it's still a long journey until everybody realizes that this is where we have to go and this is the direction, because the implications are huge. Imagine if you want to plan transportation, long-term transportation plan or a healthcare or education, it's very different between 1.6 million people in the Negev, that this is the business as usual scenario for the next 30 years, to 3.5 million people. If you want houses or housing opportunities for 3.5 million people, it means that in Israel timeline and bureaucracy, you need to start planning them now and not wait for the next crisis. And we see it now, by the way, with the Ukrainian-Russian war, that suddenly we have immigrants, but still we're not ready. We're not ready in advance. And the whole idea of the 2048 vision is to be ready for this so-called crisis.
I want to touch that vision, but I have to ask you this, because I think it's very important for our viewers to understand where you're coming from. When you are creating those, visions, those communities, and you see the change on the ground, you mentioned before the public opinion and getting the public to understand and know better. You threw in the information center. Maybe you can expand a little bit. What is the information center you created as a center for information about opportunities in the Negev, and how do people interact with that concept?
So we understood that, on one hand you have the supply, the other hand you have the demand, and then the enablers that need to connect it. So there are lots of target audiences, like Olim and ultra-Orthodox and soldiers after the army like us, and many others. And on the other hand, what are the products? What can we supply them? And what are the gaps and the enablers that we need to create? And we understood that there is no data about the incentives, about the housing, about the jobs. Who is connecting all these dots? So we were mapping more than 400 towns and cities and communities in the Negev and the Galilee. We have today thousands of jobs available, more than 2,000 educational
So you created that information hub.
Yes, exactly.
And that information hub is a physical center, or is it a call center?
It's both. We have it in the heart of the city of Beersheba, the old city of Beersheba, where everything started from Abraham that days 4,000 years ago. So we are in the heart of the city. So we have a visitor center and then an information center. Tens of thousands of people are calling us and coming to see in their eyes the vision, the solution, the answers. And then we have all the technology, because we can connect the dots, and to have everybody that has an idea or initiative or whatever they want to do. So we became not only about the Negev and the Galil, it's about ideas, it's about innovation and action. And this information and data center is your ability to start your life in Israel, to change your life in Israel, to improve your life in Israel. So, we call it information center, but it's bettering your life center, actually. And this is the whole point of what we do in life.
That message cannot get lost, because to me, to my sensitive ear, even listening to you and going to people who live in the periphery and tell them, you're not periphery, you're central. You're central to that state, you're central to our society, you're central to our vision. This is an incredible social message, even more than this is,
Language is everything, So if you continue calling the periphery, and you continue to call the development towns, they will always stay development towns, and the periphery will always stay the periphery. So sometimes these nuances, you need to change them, and you need to start calling the Negev and the Galil the new centers. And the development towns, they're not development towns, they're equitable cities that are equal, giving it's coming from equality, from quality, from equity. It's like a combination of everything, like this word, we chose this word. But it just means that in Hebrew we call it Ir Shava.
Shava.
Arim Shavot. Like Shava is also
equal,
but it's also Shava, like slang, for it's best place to live in.
Right.
So you need to change all these languages, and this is part of the public awareness and part of changing the mindset of people.
Changing the mindset.
It's language, it's mindset, and all the way down to the neighborhoods that we call them today communihoods, because in the end of the day, we are again facing from security issues to economic issues to health issues, to climate, to, you name it. It's Israel, it's all over the planet, and in a way we believe that we found the path. Because if you can have a vision on one hand and then to take it all the way down, from the top down to the bottom up, from the macro to the micro, and then to come to this neighborhood and create out of it a community that people take responsibility. So it's not only about independent center or independent city, it's independent community.
Right.
And your neighborhood, and we call it like the flip-flop index. Why? You can take your flip-flop and to get to any service that you can imagine. And once you feel it, so you feel secure, you feel prosper, you feel that this
like
is the best
belong.
place to live, you belong. And once you feel that you are belong to this place, you are aware of it, you have the pride, you don't want to leave, and this is how you create a magnet all the way down and then all the way up. And just imagine that you come to these cities that people, when we came to the Negev 20 years ago, told us, are you nuts? We are leaving, you are coming. Today, they are flying on the air. You can see them. You can see the young people, they say, okay, I'm going to build my startup, my art, my culture, like everything is happening here. You don't need to find it in Tel Aviv or New York or London, Australia. It's in the Negev, it's in the Galilee. It's just the beginning of the state of Israel, actually.
It's incredible just to listen to manifestation of a dream. You know, I'm holding in my hands what you showed me before is your annual report. I'm sorry, your annual action report. I love that there is so much that's being done. And I just want to make sure that it doesn't get lost for our viewers. When you're talking about Vision 2048, Israel Centennial, it's not just words for you guys. It's an actual action plan, right? Talk to me a little bit about Vision 2048.
So it started, what I said before, that we started to analyze the numbers, and then after understanding the gaps and the problems, we came up with this, the Israel 2048 vision. We chose 2048 from obvious reasons. We wanted to see how Israel is entering the next century of its existence. And then to make a long story short, the bottom line of the action items and the action plan that we decided that we need to take, that need to happen in the next 30 years is that Israel will become a three centers country. But as Roni said before, this is the top down, but we always work from the bottom up. And the communihoods, the communal neighborhoods that we are working in, the equitable cities that we are choosing to work in and expanding, this is all the bottom up. So it's always our action item and the methodology, I would say, that our movement has been and will be working with, is always top down and bottom up, like Magen David, which is bottom up and top down. And this is the way that we're attacking and tackling every problem that we're facing. Proof of concepts and top-down strategy, government decisions, macro planning.
And you keep on learning from the cumulative experience that you have over the years to be able to feed into the new ventures.
Not only from Israel, by the way, from world experience as well.
Which is an amazing point, because you keep on talking about community-hoods, and I think to myself, that kind of experience is relevant globally. I'm thinking about neighborhoods in New York, neighborhoods all over the world, where mayors or communal leaders want to create that sense of belonging, that bottom-up, top-bottom processes. It's an incredible experience.
We get calls, by the way,
right,
from South America, from Europe, from Africa.
Right.
Come, we want a vision. They call it Albania 2048. We say, guys, Israel was established in 1948. Why you think it should be Albania 2048? Never mind, but yeah, it's global. It's global, but we need to do it first in Israel. This is our beta site, and this is the place to start, you know. And you asked about how we implement it. Yep. So first, it's to make sure that there is a plan, there is a direction and compass for Israel. Then the government should accept and adopt it as a plan. And then we are going via all the processes of the policy, because we have 26 ministries and ministers that need to sign. So that's what we are doing in the last year, and it will take it to the next year. And then we are not waiting. We are going, and we have 61 mayors on the ground that with each one of them we are trying to sell them, or actually to make them adopt it, and because it's all there. and they are the one to start to lead this plan. And imagine that now we are in touch with Disneyland to create it in Dimona. We are going to create a safari between Eilat and Mitzpe Ramon. Right. We are going to create in Akko. We just brought the Rimon music music school, and people said, no way, they are not going to leave the Tel Aviv area.
No. Sitting with you, there is no way. I'm going to say no way. I'm already sold.
So we have like 18 mega projects that are going to happen. Each one of them seems to be impossible, but we swore to ourselves when we started that there will be even a day that we are going to deal with a possible project, because it's a waste of time. Right. Only if it's impossible, this is our role, because to make the impossible possible, that's the way you change the planet, and that's the way you establish the next phase of the country.
You know, it's enough to go and visit and see actually what you've done in Israel, and I recommend all of our viewers to go to the Negev, visit the Galilee, reach out to Or and take a look. It's truly incredible. I want something to make something clear so it doesn't get lost. So your two, if I understand correctly, your two pipelines are, one, establishing the new communities as you have done since that 1999 first Sansana, Israel's Independence Day, and then at the same time you roam around with this serum, with this injection to existing communities to strengthen them using your analysis on the one hand and actual assistance in implementation. I say this because when I visited one of those communities in the south, I was with one of your staffers, and you know, it's one of those development towns, periphery as you say, a little bit dilapidated, older community as people fleeing to the center of Israel. And I remember your guy looking at me and saying, what's that building you see behind you? Well, I said, you know, look, an old administrative bureaucratic building, lovely place. Why, do you have a meeting there? He said, no, what you're looking at actually is the next food tech hub of Israel. Our analysis has shown that 60% of Israeli produce is made in these regions. Therefore, it makes perfect sense for companies dealing with these issues to come here. And I was blown away. You know, that vision, that thought, and all of this tied to actual implementation on the ground. These words do not remain just, you know, floating in midair. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's the part of the action or the working plan of the Equitable Cities is also to create these economic growth engines in each one of these cities. So what you mentioned is one of them, and then, for example, Ofakim, which is stationed in the western Negev, which is considered to be like the barn of Israel because it's surrounded by agriculture and farming, will become the innovation center of agritech. It's opening very soon with partners like Sarona Partners in the city and support from the government, and it will start in a couple of months. And in Dimona, which is an industrial city, dozens of industrial companies and factories that are based there. Right. But the innovation for the industry is coming now from Tel Aviv. So the blue collar, the workers live in Dimona, but the tech and the innovation is coming from Tel Aviv. So why not connect them to one area which consists both the innovation, the beta sites, and the customers. So now we're establishing an innovation center in Dimona for Industry 4.0. And in each city that we are operating in, this is one of the first things that we are doing to discuss, and we make this decision. We're not coming to the city and we say, this is what you need. We're coming to the city and we offer our help in the process and bringing in together the city and the employees of the city, of the municipality, the leaders of the city, people from the third sector, from the government, from businesses that are surrounding or located in the city. We're doing this process together. Eventually, there is a result, and then we're not a think tank or just a strategy team that puts on the table a very nice brochure with a plan. We are actually going to do it. So that's the way that it's happening in those cities.
I want to ask you quickly, just to relate to one issue. People think of the Negev, for instance. It has various communities, not just Jewish, but also, you know, Bedouins and others. Is Or in touch with these communities?
Yeah, you're in touch, like we are in touch with everybody, because as we said before, it's a new center. It's not about specific place or specific society. It's about everybody. And not just with words. It's about everybody because you include everybody. And the story and the chapters in the book are including everybody. And you're not speaking about, you're speaking with the people. And once you speak with them, so you know there is the politicians and the leaders,
Right.
and we are not innocent to think that everything can be changed easily. But we understand that it's generations of a process. But we have realized, for example, the Bedouins in the Negev, it's all over the news today, 40, 50 years, for good reasons maybe, the government was not dealing with them. From 11,000 people, there are now 300,000 people living in the Negev on more than 600,000 dunams. It's illegal on one hand, but there are gaps in the situation and in terms of humanity. So what are you doing? It's not left-wing, it's not black-white, it's not dark-light.
It's life on the ground.
Life on the ground, very, very, very complicated. So we are jumping into it, into the ultra-Orthodox society, which consists of all kinds of, 50
Varieties.
colors of black,
Right.
let's call it, okay?
Yeah.
So we are maybe foolish enough to step in and say we are going to do it.
May God bless the earth with such foolishness.
It's not because
Right.
we are able to do it. It's not because it's possible, it's because somebody has to do it, and it's our generation to do it.
Yeah.
And more than the technical things, and we should not skip it, because it's not about populating or developing the Negev and the Galilee. It's there. It's about Zionism. And what is Zionism? Zionism is the innovation of each generation on the land and of the people of Israel, that you need to invent it, reinvent it, and to make it relevant to your generation. It's body, mind, soul. It's not technical. We are running today more than 160 projects all over, which is a lot. And again, we are channeling huge money from here, and we have lots of initiatives and processes, but everything is just about the inside of Israel. It's about the interior processes, about the language, the conversation, that we are losing our unity, our brotherhood, our bridge from Jews in Israel and all over the planet. So if we will be able to take the technical things, the projects, but to make sure that the why we do it, for who we do it, how we're going to do it, then the what will serve the best cause. And then we will be able to succeed with dreams and visions, and actually to live a great life. And this is an open invitation for everybody to be part of it. It's a big party, big celebration. It's not about suffering and struggling. We are happy. We didn't work one day in our life. We are just implementing and embracing challenges.
Just before, I know we're approaching the end of the show, but I just want to run two quick things by. One, how did COVID affect you? If you want to tell me, quickly.
We were sick for once. No, I'm kidding.
COVID tripled the demand.
Triple the demand.
It tripled the demand. COVID proved that you can live in the Negev, and sometimes, we aspire that the jobs will be in the Negev, but sometimes people want to relocate, they're afraid of the job. So COVID proved that you can also work from distance and go to the office a couple of days.
Oh, interesting.
And the most important, I think, that what COVID caused is the sense of community. So all the researchers today show that the people that crossed COVID in the best way, didn't get depression and other issues, are people who lived in healthy and strong community. And this kind of proved all the concept of community-hoods. What Roni said before, that if all the neighborhoods of Israel will become communities, we will never be able to be crashed or stopped, because the resiliency will be so strong. So this is, I think, one of the most important results of COVID, showing that the community strength and resiliency is essential. It's essential for any challenge that is going to come upon us in the future.
And you also mentioned briefly the Ukrainian-Russian war that's taking place. How did that play a part in your operations? Were you called to assist, or how were you part of?
So we were talking about it and arranging and trying to be ready for that with the government, the mayors, etc. But again, people think that when you imagine something or visioning, it's not going to happen. Everything that we imagine will happen, for the good and the bad. So Ukraine as well. we knew it's going to happen, not specific day and specific place. So today we are doing two things. One is in Ukraine. We are there. We have missions. We call it the One Heart operation, and we help to to supply equipment in and people out. And in Israel, so for the new centers of Israel, so we help the Olim to find the families that are going to adopt them. We find Ukrainian and Russian families that we are in the different hotels that now all the Olim are staying there, and we supplying them equipment, and then we start the discussion. Then we tell them, guys, what are your plans? We have some offers for you. We have more than 2,000 housing solutions so far, and hundreds of jobs available that our information center created for a package. And the high-tech companies in Israel, and not only Israel, are helping us to create, medical insurance and all kinds of ways to start their life, and they are fully integrated into this process, and this is amazing. And thank God that we were ready for such a thing.
And also
unfortunately,
an opportunity,
it's happening, yeah.
Right, and an opportunity to remind of how much we need to prepare for the future.
Yeah.
It sounds to me more like an activation center than an information center.
That's true.
But sitting with you also gets me very...
We'll talk later about the branding, the new branding of
Very, very activated. Thank you so much. It's been utterly inspirational just to sit and listen to you. You're amazing, truly. I think I echo the emotions of all of those who are going to view this and listen to you. Your message is incredibly strong and meaningful, especially these days. Thank you for taking the time to share your story with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you, Roni and Ofir. Such passionate Zionism and long-term vision and work for the people and the state of Israel. More than inspiration for someone like me who's been very much heavily involved in the fight for Israel in the field of public opinion. It's incredible to take part not just in standing by Israel in words, but also be part of the efforts in deeds. So relish in that inspiration and take part in the dream. And remember Roni and Ofir's criteria: when it's impossible, it's possible. Thank you to our viewers. I really appreciate spending time with us, and I hope that these acts and words that you've heard of today from Roni and Ofir will inspire you to believe in Israel's great future and its glorious present, not to mention all that is expected in the future. May we rejoice in the opportunity our generation has in building our one and only Jewish state of Israel. I'd like to thank you all for watching and see you all next time as we cast an eye on Israel.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more. Simply visit the JBS website at jbstv.org and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check to JBS, Post Office Box 360, Stamford, Connecticut 06904. Or you can call the JBS Pledge Line at 833-MY-JBS-TV. That's 833-695-2788. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. We thank you for your kind support.